The distinct difference between the organized and the underprepared can make or break a situation, should one call for it. But despite the hiccups that came with the territory of pro-hero work, you decided to heed Uraraka's advice to make a day away from the grind, to prepare for an important date in your soon-to-be foreseen future. The bell that rang above the entrance was a light jingle to your ear upon entering the store Uraraka suggested for you to visit, at least to garner some inspiration. You weren't one for design. In fact, it was a bit of a mess when you tried to consider what colors worked or what type of cutlery would suit. Homewrecker, you were, but it didn't stop you from trying to see things fit.
How about these for dressings?
Harked a voice from behind while you pondered on the fabrics in the store, turning to find Midoriya holding out a deep forest green in his hands.
Your inclination to the color doesn't surprise me.
You chuckled while you approached him, your hands lightly gliding across the fibers he held.
We could go with rich colors to offset the tone, but what about the theme?
It'll be spring. Cherry blossoms and all if we get the timing right.
That'll be the day, but the backup would be the beach park?
Midoriya nodded, agreeing to the plan that both of you spoke aloud to each other. An early start in the store was a smart decision after having perused through the vastness of its wares, unsure where to start. Both of you had already decided on the smaller details such as the welcome box and the wedding favors for the guests, despite it being a small event in hindsight. But the overall look was still up in the air.
It is a pretty place,
you remarked while you still stroked the cloth in Midoriya's hands.
Huh?
Piped Midoriya.
Takoba, I was surprised and proud to hear that you cleared all of that junk from it years ago. At 14.
Midoriya chuckled inwardly, a little bashful about the event and even more so about him recounting the event to you. However, he was met with a loving smile, watching your pride shine through for him.
Thank you so much for letting me in your life.
You continued with content.
Hey, let's leave the speeches for the wedding, okay, cutie?
Assured Midoriya while he wrapped the cloth in his hands, placing it in the basket he carried alongside with him.
Wanna divide and conquer?
You asked, catching him off guard.
I'll take florals, seeing that we'll be matching the cherry blossom season. And you take your pick of the colors?
Midoriya contemplated the decision, wondering if it was best to leave you to your devices on any decision-making. But a partnership was a two-way street. He sighed inwardly at the thought of your indecisiveness sometimes, soon agreeing to your tactic before you made your way towards the large section of plant life across the way. His eye would soon be seeing colors of most shades, keeping the forest green he still had on hand. The more he thought about the choice, the more he could see the wedding in sight, covered with drapery and cascading with the falling petals of spring. He could see his family and his friends, his loved ones who were still on this earth, and foremost, you walking down the aisle. It brought a flush to his cheeks, wondering what outfit you'd be wearing on the day.
It'll look better than organza, I think. No!
In his absent-mindedness focusing on the colors and his thoughts, Midoriya accidentally bumped into someone in the aisle, almost tripping over himself. He clutched onto his basket to turn and find...
Ah!
What a surprise, he thought, finding Bakugo's fiancée before him, with basket in hand and already with a few samples in the store. It seemed the store was the talk of the town if he found them perusing through it, let alone bumping into them for that matter. A bit of small talk between the two was made, soon turning the conversation onto Midoriya's own wedding plans. Little did he know you weren't too far from him. unable to ignore the conversation over yonder with a smile. It was adorable to overhear, despite the idea of eavesdropping being a little rude. But you couldn't help how the voices carried quite easily between aisles.
Oh, when is it?
Interrupted Bakugo's fiancé with excitement.
Sorry if it's a secret or anything.
Oh, not at all.
Started Midoriya with a smile, thinking about you.
It'll be sometime in spring. You can't do that.
Roared a very loud, familiar voice, the footsteps almost stomping towards them. You flinched, almost gasping in surprise before you quietened yourself. Of course, Bakugo would be here with his fiancée, just as much as you were here with Midoriya. However, that twinge of rage in his voice was difficult to ignore.
We've already made plans in spring, so you better move yours.
Threatened Bakugo angrily.
You're planning spring as well? When?
Asked Midoriya, genuinely curious.
Doesn't matter. Yes, it does. I proposed first. What does that have to do with anything?
The sound of their voices rising with each statement made your head lower between your shoulders, curling a little from the oncoming confrontation that you could feel from across the aisle. Bakugo's fiancé had the right idea to interrupt them before it escalated any further, only for you to decide to do the same.
Izuku?
You called out, hoping your voice hid the slight nervous energy you felt from the small yet heated argument Midoriya had with Bakugo. Soon you heard footsteps headed your way, finding Midoriya appear from behind the shelves and meet you amongst the florals, still with basket in hand, but a little flustered from the encounter earlier.
Are you okay?
You asked, spotting Midoriya's mood a little less hearty than it was before. There was a pout on his lips while his eyes looked away. He was in contemplation over the confrontation, mulling over Bakugo's irate snap over wedding plans of all things. You saw it in his face, recognizing that processing stare of his all too well.
Izuku?
You called again, gentler with a hand on his arm that pulled him away from his thoughts. He turned to you, now a little embarrassed for his absent-mindedness.
Sorry, cutie. I'm just a little confused.
He admitted.
Sounds like Bakugo is on his high horse again.
You commented.
It's not that. I just didn't expect him to be so pushy about this.
True. The years you had learned about Midoriya's friendship with Bakugo had been both rewarding and mind-boggling. It took some time for you to realize that they were alike in the smallest ways, as if they were two sides of the same coin, cut from the same cloth at the very least. Yet overhearing the earlier encounter also brought some questions to mind. What was Bakugo so protective and angry about?
Come on. Let's head over to dining. Maybe we'll start small.
You suggested, taking Midoriya by his large hand through the aisle. Midoriya only smiled, attempting to forego the little mishap to spend the day with you. After all, there were very few opportunities in the future to spend some quality time, given the work both of you endured in Musutafu. An hour or two perusing the store came with very little peace after the run-in with Bakugo. Every so often, the both of you heard him across the store, carrying his voice while he made comments about choices he and his fiancée were considering. It was as if he were announcing the choices they made, as if to communicate their plans for the both of you to hear. It was no surprise that they were more so directed to Midoriya, and the tone was almost brutal at times. Despite this, you both considered a few things for your own wedding, having chosen the theme, the colors, and now whittling down to the style. Roaming the aisles came with a few discussion points, but it resulted in the following decision that you had yet to make. The venue.
Well, it's either the stage in the park or the beach.
You mused while eyeing different textured decor along the aisles.
Whichever place we decide should play a role in our choices.
Midoriya hummed in agreement, his eyes scanning around the stall.
Do you think maybe we should just stay at the beach park? It'll be away from the public eye, at least a lot less than the city park.
You continued, considering the availability and the media fiasco that would potentially be rampant when they discover this event. You heard nothing from Midoriya. In fact, over the course of the visit, he had been more alert about Bakugo's presence than his own.
Hey, Izuku.
You called, your hand on his arm to pull him back with you.
We could come back another day if you want.
No, it's not that. It's... I need to speak with Kachan.
He explained, his eyes on you while he held your hand in his, clutching onto it tightly.
This here is what I want. But if Kachan is holding his wedding in the same season...
You won't get what you want.
You concluded, your mind seamlessly on the same page of Midoriya's thoughts. Despite Bakugo's penchant for announcing loudly about what he was planning for his special day, it didn't overshadow the one thing Midoriya wanted for his own. Discussions and decisions were made between the both of you long before this outing. Mostly during work hours and brief moments crossing paths.
Maybe have a talk with him.
You suggested.
Find a moment when he's not so... forceful, I guess. If it is timing, we haven't even decided on our venue. We could move it around.
Midoriya thoughtfully considered your words, perusing his mind about your plans and how things could easily shift. That was what he loved about you. The way your mind worked. How you shared with him all possibilities and considerations, and how there was always a backup plan. He smiled and chuckled before he leaned in for a gentle kiss on your forehead, content with your suggestion.
Good plan.
He murmured with his lips and breath close to you.
You know what? Let's have it at the beach park. The sunset is gorgeous there.
So no complaints about sand?
You questioned with a smirk.
That's a future us problem.
Have you thought about having that conversation with him first before you go about spitting fire in his face again?
Interrupted a voice opposite the aisle both of you stood in, your attention drawn over the shelves.
Let me rephrase. Before you blast him?
You couldn't help but stifle a chuckle before Midoriya joined in with both of your shoulders shaking from the statement. Ironic that the subject of your conversation was the next aisle over, soon spotting the familiar top of the blonde's head just over the shelves.
I think we should move on.
You suggested in a whisper.
Leave them be. We'll pick out some more dressings for a beach wedding.
Good idea.
Agreed Midoriya.
I'll find time to speak with Kachan when we leave, unless he leaves first.
Just make sure you do it when you can. We don't want him bursting a blood vessel too soon.
Midoriya chuckled again, holding back in case it carried so closely into the next aisle over. Despite all that the man had gone through his life, that smile always brightened any dull and darkened day. It was what you loved about him the most. Nearing the end of the day came with a more lighter mood, now having made solid decisions on the special day. You still have to book the venue, but that would come under garnering assistance from friends a little into the future. You recalled Asui was happy to help with any paperwork for the location, whilst Yaoyorozu had a decent pull into council and local matters. Even with the number 1 status Midoriya held, proper channels still need to be made. It was the right thing to do. Once at checkout, Midoriya excused himself, having spotted Bakugo ahead, already at the cashier's himself. You chuckled inwardly at the cross look on his face, wondering if he had enough of shopping today. You watched as Midoriya pulled him over to discuss the matters he needed to speak with the blonde, and soon landed your eyes on his fiancée taking care of their goods. You couldn't help yourself, having spoken with them many times crossing paths, and at events held by their partners, but something niggled at the back of your mind. You decided to excuse yourself from the cashier, asking to continue your purchase while you made your way towards them. Their back to you while they were focused on their own purchases for the day.
Still deciding?
You asked before they turned around with a momentary lapse of recognition.
Oh, yeah. Well, I figured we needed to keep things simple enough before the absolute go-ahead.
They explained.
I'm practically planning most of it. No wedding planner? Well, most of the major decisions have been made thanks to Katsuki.
You weren't surprised to hear that after the kind of day that had transpired today.
I'm sorry about Katsuki's behavior.
They apologized, catching you off guard.
I mean, we know he's a little rough, but I didn't expect him to act this way today. Think nothing of it.
You reassured with a shake of your head.
You're right. He is rough around the edges.
The both of you giggled, agreeing with sentiments shared. Bakugo's fiancée had known Midoriya and him longer than you had, but it felt kindred to share with someone who was on the other side of this tumultuous yet endearing friendship.
I'm sure the boys will come to some agreement.
You voiced, your eyes turning towards them aside from the store's checkout lanes.
I hope so too.
Agreed Bakugo's fiancée, sharing the sentiments once more. The crickety sound of a large cart made its way towards you across the way, spotting the cashier parking it close to the exit before they signaled you for finalizing payments. You made your farewells with a quick step to do so, leaving Bakugo's fiancée to do the same. Eventually, you trekked with the cart to the modest car in the parking lot, unloading everything into it while you eyed the exit of the store. Midoriya had yet to leave, wondering if the conversation was still in discussion, or if anything worse came out of it. You only wanted the world for that man, soon packing everything inside neatly and locking the car before leaning on its side. It wasn't long until you noticed that familiar tall build of Midoriya's walk across the parking lot, his eyes locked on you with a wide smile.
Ready, kitty?
He called out from across the parking lot.
Packed and good to go.
You replied back, tossing the car keys to him. With a successful catch in his hand, Midoriya waltzed up to the car, joining you as he unlocked it and entered into the driver's seat.
So, I'm guessing it went well?
You conjectured while spotting the look on Midoriya's face.
Better than I thought.
He replied, leaning in towards you. In unison, you did the same, your lips touching his in a kiss, one that lingered a little longer than you anticipated. You couldn't help but smile, feeling his breath against you just as he did with yours. That wide smile of his was addicting sometimes, filled to the brim with joy and content. You guessed he got what he wanted in the end, unscathed from Bakugo's wrath, but something else spoke volumes in his eyes, almost twinkling with happiness. Midoriya stared into yours, elated to share the news.
Guess who's the best man at Ground Zero's wedding?